most companies raised money to exit, whereas like we've always thought of things in like a bigger picture. I feel like I caught the last plane out of Vietnam as a female entrepreneur in the girl boss era.
How do you decide in the Betches news space what stays in your lane versus what's off-brand?
We're not a newsroom. We are never going to be a newsroom. This is an interpretive space.
You mentioned that the left is really good at whispering in the DMs, while the right is very much strategically building this voting block through culture wars.
There's a military-grade influence operation to divide people based on these culture war things. And that's why I say, like, culture is politics now. One thing I want to say about the right is you cannot underestimate the power of money. They have so much more money.
Prior to having this conversation with you, I spoke with the Hugobooms, who are behind Evie Magazine. I asked Brittany, the co-founder, what she would ask a guest who was representing more of the liberal media side. She wanted to ask,
would you gain 50 pounds in solidarity of the body positivity movement?
Yes, but...
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Before we get into today's interview, this episode is meant to be heard alongside last week's interview. So if you haven't already, please follow and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Last week, we heard from Brittany and Gabriel Hugoboom, co-founders of the conservative outlet Evie Magazine. Today, we're looking at the other side of the spectrum with someone who helped define millennial feminism, satire, and progressive digital culture. My guest today is Sami Sage, co-founder of Betches, a media company that started anonymously on a couch in 2011 and went on to become one of the rare profitable success stories in women's media, all without raising venture capital. In 2023, Betches exited for $24 million with an additional performance-based upside that could reach $30 million. In this conversation, Sami breaks down why satire was the secret weapon behind Betches' early growth and why she refused for years to change a brand name people told her would hold them back. We also talk about how she scaled a voice that resonated with college students and mothers alike without diluting its edge, and how Betches evolved from pop culture commentary into news, politics, and cultural analysis. Sami also opens up about stepping into overtly political work, hosting the Morning Announcements news podcast, and writing Democracy in Retrograde, and what happens when creators become the primary news source for a generation. In the same way I asked Brittany what she thinks about liberal media, I asked Sami for her take on the rise of tradwife aesthetics, how beauty is politicized, and why she believes culture, not policy, is the real battleground shaping democracy right now. As I said last week, there are a lot of hot takes in this episode and in my episode with Brittany and Gabriel. And I know you won't agree with all of them. That would literally be impossible because there are polar opposite opinions across these episodes. And not agreeing is totally okay. I don't want you to feel like you have to agree with everything my guests say. I don't even agree with everything my guests say, but I always want to hear how you're thinking about what you hear on Social Currency. So please slide into my DMs and tell me your thoughts about these episodes. I can't wait to hear them. Let's get into it. This is Sami Sage's Social Currency. Sami Sage, welcome to Social Currency.
Hi, Sammi.
You're my first Sammi on the pod.
Oh my gosh.
Which is kind of rare.
I know. I feel like I meet a million Sammies in real life and I'm like, how'd you pick? Why didn't you go Sam?
Well, it's a really random ass story. But
Tell it.
When I was in second grade, I had when you're really young, you like idolize girls that are a little bit older than you.
Yes.
I had a girl who was 2 grades older and she spelled it Sammi, and I was like, I'm going to copy her.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I would maybe expect. That isn't how I came up with mine. I don't really know. I did try out a few different ways. Like there was a 6-month period where I was Sammi, I was Sammie. You got to iterate.
Of course.
And then I think I just landed on Sammi M with 1 M, and here we are.
Okay, well, Sammi with 1 M and 1 I. You have shaped how millennial and Gen Z women talk about culture, humor, and now politics, which we're going to get into. And Betches has become this media empire. But it really did start as something more scrappy and fun. So I want to rewind to the very beginning because we have to start there.
Yes.
So you started Betches anonymously on a couch in 2011 with 2 friends.
Yes.
When you look back now, what were the earliest signals that what you were doing wasn't just some extracurricular activity?
I mean, immediately, like the fact that there were so many comments and the fact that it just went very viral very quickly in the true sense of virality that you could have in 2011, where it was like very clear what was viral. And it was like every day for months. And then I would say the first like real legitimizing sign was we were contacted by a producer who asked us if we wanted to turn it into a TV show. And, you know, we ended up getting in contact with our agent, who is still our agent, my book agent for my most recent book. And she ended up, you know, telling us what we should do, like keeping up the blog and like keeping that going so that we could sell for, like, have a platform to sell books on. And in so many ways, the book has become like, that book became just like one project that, you know, it was really meaningful and really helped grow our brand at the time. But what her real advice was, you know, you got to keep going and doing content every day. And that was kind of like, you know, and then we ended up basically getting a book deal the summer after we graduated, and that was with Simon and Schuster, and our parents know what that is. So, you know, versus like you know, how many hits did you get on your WordPress? Like that meant nothing to them. I would say like those were the really earliest signs, like that really meant something. But even right off the bat, people were commenting, and we saw people sharing it to Facebook, tweeting it. And we gave up the anonymous to our innermost circle, and also like everyone we went to college with, within like weeks or something, like 2 weeks.
At the time, I think to really hone in on the early 2010s, building a media empire then is so different from how it is today.
Yeah.
So I'm sure when you were even thinking about going into that full time, it was a little bit scary, right?
There was no one day like where we graduated and we felt like, okay, we're just going to like do this full time and we know it's going to work. Like we knew we were going to do it. And we were going to take it to wherever we could take it. But there was no sense of like, oh, how we don't know how long that will be, what the deadline was. And I want to really reiterate is like, I won the lottery, like actually in terms of career. Like it doesn't, no one thinks about it that way because, you know, you don't pick the Powerball out. But like the situation that I have ended up with is 1 in a billion situation. And where the timing of our friendship, the three of us, like knowing each other for so long, doing this thing, graduating at that particular time where we could like, we had to then, you know, figure it out. We like had that little like kick in the butt. We're not still in college where we can just kind of keep working on it and see. And then the timing with like the internet and then the way that social media, you know, panned out. And, you know, I don't want to say, oh, none of it was like our own insights. Obviously, that is, you know, it wouldn't have existed if we didn't do that and act on it. But the recipe, like the ingredients were there that allowed us to grab onto success and have allowed me to, you know, grab onto, you know, working on politics and news. Like we can talk about that in like the revenue model, because I think there's a lot of luck in terms of the timing there as well. And, you know, in terms of advice for people, like I think that is something that gets overlooked. Like it's not all about what you do. It's also the conditions that are set for you. And I think examining them is really important.
Okay, we're going to talk about the revenue model because I know my listeners are going to love that.
Yeah.
But I want to also talk about the very distinctive voice of Betches. Obviously, it's something that you've cultivated over a long time. And originally, and I'm going back to the earlier days, it was really tapping into this sense of almost like shock humor, satire, and very early on, it was this very distinctive millennial sorority POV that was very much almost like a direct, more feminist response to the frat bro voice of that time, which was very distinctive.
That is literally what we set out to do, actually.
Yeah, and it was spot on. I remember being in college and literally going on to, it was
Betches, lovethisite.com.
Yes, yeah. Like religiously. And all my friends would talk about it. And I was in a sorority. I went to USC, Delta Gamma. And it was just, it was so ingrained in our just lexicon at the time.
That's how we knew we had something.
Yeah.
Who could have guessed it would be another Jewish girl named Sami? You know, it's very, my feeling was that it was, that was what we were trying to do. We weren't trying to be influencers. We've never, like the three of us are not that, you know, I don't want to say it's a bad thing because it's not. You know, I am trying to have a career as talent. But at the time, we were not setting out to be influencers or be face forward. Some of that was practical. When we started, we thought we were going to go work regular jobs. You know, I don't even know what I thought it was going to be. At one point, I wanted to be a lawyer. You know, I worked in like HR. And, that was always kind of a possibility. It wasn't what I wanted to do. But yeah, it was very much like we felt, and we spent so much time like iterating on that voice. Like we would go like agonize over specific words and like, how do you say this? Like, is this cringe? We didn't use the word cringe, but like, is this it? Like, would she say this? And that I think is just so, it's innate in it. And and what it is that it's a worldview, it's an attitude. I mean, it's not like everyone has to have the same views, but it is a sense of, sort of basic edginess. Like you want to do things for yourself. You kind of want to think for yourself. You'll say things that people won't say. And I think that everyone talks about being authentic on the internet. That is all sort of, everyone talks about it, but it's one of those things where when you see it more.
Yeah.
And that's what we really have always tried to cultivate with the Betches voice.
Yeah. The way that you do it today, and you started this way as well, is through a lot of humor.
Yes.
So you could have taken a very different angle here. You could have gone the serious route. You could have said, but why humor?
Well, it's humor, and it's really the satire. It's and I actually think that that's something that really defines why I say like the three of us are so lucky to have as friends this sort of like bond, because there's this sense of like we can make fun of each other. Like we trust and know each other enough to kind of hold like keep each other grounded in a way, not in like a mean way, but in a way it's like, okay, I'll call you on your bullshit, but like I love you, like you're my sister. Like we really do have a very sisterly relationship. And so I think that enables us to be really honest, or enabled us in the past to be really honest in the voice, like what we were writing. I mean, I personally love satire. It is my favorite genre. I think it is the most effective way of communicating anything. Even though usually like half the people don't get it and they're like, oh, this is so me. That was like, but I think it's just the most effective way of communicating things. I think it takes people's guards down. It's like, we never wanted to sound like haters. Like, even though we were kind of making fun of this lifestyle and this girl, like we were making fun of ourselves. So it's not in a mean way. It's not to feel bad about yourself. It's to point out the ridiculousness and sort of just, maybe point out some of the contradictions and idiosyncrasies about this culture that ultimately is like, basic millennial women.
Yes. And along the way, people tried to get you to change the word Betches and get it out of the title of your company, but you guys refused, obviously. So why?
I mean, it was considered not brand safe. I mean, brand safety, this is like the holy grail of advertisers. And sometimes they, like the edge, sometimes they don't. At some point there was this, you did see brands that would never have gone near a company named Betches in 2011, 2012. They now are looking for edgier companies, and they're looking for kind of their creative way of advertising. And that is honestly something I think that we have again really, and I really have to credit my co-founder Aileen with, she's now the I can tell you about, kind of the process of getting purchased and all of that. Purchased, acquired. I'm like, is that what do people say? You purchase, add to cart. It was so not like that. But, really turning into like a studio for brands that can come to us because we have shown this like excellence in advertising and have shown that we can make it really fun and something really brand aligned. Like we just launched Betch of the Year with Duncan and Lindsay Lohan as the host, which is like
so excited.
That is like the most full circle thing ever, because Betch of the Year was a concept that we invented literally on that couch. Chelsea Handler was our first Betch of the Year. Actually, well, it wasn't. It was probably at the end of the year that year, but whatever. In our first year, we came up with Betch of the Year, and now it's like this huge thing. And Lindsay Lohan, obviously Mean Girls is Mean Girls is sort of like the text, if you could say, it's like that, because that's like the perfect satire. That is like it.
Yeah.
The model.
That Betch of the Year, also just the social surrounding Betch of the Year.
We have an incredible team. We've been making really incredible, amazing hires. And we also have had people who have been working with us for like going on a decade.
Wow.
So it's crazy.
Okay, so we've been talking a bit about obviously the background of the company. I want to talk about the financial side because we've also been alluding to that. So in terms of the financial success, you've said that this is really like a 1 in a billion for a lot of reasons, right? Now, Betches never took on venture capital, which is also increasingly rare in a company that's been around as long as your company has. And it's really become one of the rare financial success stories, specifically in women's media too, especially at a time when you have many media companies that were popping up around the same time that Betches did, who are struggling or no longer around. So in 2023, though, you exited, or in your words, purchased or acquired.
Yeah, no, we were acquired.
For $24 million, and you were remaining profitable even at that stage. So what do you think made Betches so successful in one of these rare cases?
So there were a few things. I mean, one is the formula of the three of us being so close. Like, I think that three women together can really be explosive, or three founders together. We have such a history that like we trust each other like family, and we've really been through so much together. And I think that level of trust and sort of agreement and alignment with what we wanted ultimately, and sort of the things we fundamentally want. You know what I mean? You could always have sort of disagreements over like this thing or that thing. And they don't even have to be small things. That fundamental, like shared vision, shared timing of what we felt we wanted. And then also like some of this is the timing. I mean, I'll get to that in a second. Most companies raise money to exit. They exist to exit. They're not thinking about things in terms of like, do I want a company? Do I want to leave a legacy for 30 years, 50 years? Whereas like we've always thought of things kind of, or at least, have always thought of things in like a bigger picture of like, we could have a company that makes a really big difference over time. Like, I remember when we first started, and this is probably delusional, but I was thinking, I'm like, oh my God, we could have a whole media company like Viacom. And like, that was like the second week of doing this. Like, I don't know, like a good example of this, but like most companies start like very, very small. Like the ones that we all know, many of them do sort of exist to raise money. And like a lot of that is financial engineering. And I think that something that the three of us care about is like genuine value, and the idea that, we were funding our own lifestyle. Like we were able to buy houses on a steadily profitable, I mean, it took 12 years, but we always planned to run the company on its own so that it wouldn't have to be relying on raising money. And then it's also like, I mean, I would say this was the earliest reason, was we didn't want to dilute the creative. But then later when it becomes like you have to make, we kind of knew we had the sense of the creative. It became about, we don't want to dilute our vision, and we don't want we don't need this. And we believe in growing steadily because also we got to see things happen. We knew that we could not rely on the way that things move, like the platforms, like that's where most of our audience was. And that you have to always be running like a sustainable company. Like we didn't hire our first hire for 4 years. We always hired really small. We always paid ourselves very little. Like most of the money went back into the company for like several years. And it was very like slow upgrading of our lifestyles. And it was really like that careful sort of old school way of running a business that was kind of the way that we went about things.
You guys were doing this for a while before you actually got to that exit moment. So what were those specific conversations like? Because I would imagine if you have two other co-founders, right? Yes, very shared vision, but people have different feelings about like when the exact best time is. So what did that look like?
You don't get to choose. That's the thing. Yeah. So we had people approach us throughout the years, the whole time. Oh, we want to take this. We want to buy the blah, blah, blah. Always like, no, didn't feel right. Then around like 2020-ish, also think about this. Another piece of this is like where we are in life. Like one of my co-founders like had she was pregnant. She was like, we were sort of thinking about, okay, now we're moving on to, our 30s. We want to be, we do want to take some of this risk off the table. Like it's different when you're 22. And even if we had no cash, like we had no money in our own like bank accounts, we could still live with our parents. And that's a privilege when you're 22 and you can live rent free, or, and even like being able to have parents to do that is like, and I do want to really underscore this, like, because I feel like in some ways, I feel like I caught the last like plane out of Vietnam as a female entrepreneur in the girl boss era, because I had the privilege of going to a good public school, not having student loans, going to a great college, like even being able to live in my parents' house now. It's like there are so many people who do not even have that reliably, and they're like worrying about like where to live. Like this, what I'm saying is like crazy to them, that it's like, it sounds so easy. And I think back and I'm like, wow, I thought that was so terrible. Like all my friends could get apartments. And it's like, no, this was the investment. This was like, that's the equity. That's the equity you work for. We were, getting older, deciding, wanting to start families. And, you kind of want to take some risk off the table. And then also we had a company that was really successful for a while. So at that point we started speaking to like kind of exploring like what's an M&A firm that could help us. So we had a bunch of conversations. We brought on advisors at various points to help sort of not professionalize the way we were doing things. Because at this point it's like, I would say we had probably like 30 to 40 employees around 2020 maybe. And it's grown a lot in the past, like ever since then. So we met with an M&A firm. We kind of like pitched ourselves to different people. We had different conversations, but Lad Bible, who LBG Media that acquired us, came to us first while we were in the middle of sort of those early M&A conversations. They had made us an offer. We said no to it. It just like didn't feel right at the time. We had like another company in play. Then they made us an offer that was like such a terrible offer in terms of like not just the numbers, but insulting in terms of like the way of it.
Okay.
I can explain how it was structured. It's basically kind of like, now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was kind of like a private equity offer. That was basically what they were making to us as like a small business. And then kind of in the middle of that, LBG said like, we're kind of changing the way we, want to do like the way what we're looking at. And they're a UK publicly owned, publicly traded company. So they kind of, it seemed, adjusted their strategy, and that in a way that really made sense for what we were looking for. And honestly, like I really feel that we got a very fair deal. Like it's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't feel like anyone got cheated out of money. Like what I say, talk about value, like how value's really like actual real value that you can justify is like, that just hits so hard for me. Yeah. Like when I see a company that's valued properly and not just like overblown bullshit, I'm like, yeah, you deserve that. And that was really like how it, pans out. And, post acquisition is sort of its own thing. That is really how it worked. And like, it just felt right. Like they were part of, I would say, even some other conversations we had is like the way that those people, like the other people approached it was like, just didn't feel right. Like that's not the way you want to, like the way I think we felt that we wanted to be with like go to an acquirer. But the way that the lads handled it was very lad-like. They were very like real, no bullshit. Like I think there's something like British about it where it's like all very like low drama. And, I have a lot of respect for them. The founder of Lad Bible also started originally with his friend who has since, taken, he's left, but it's, good things. And yeah, so it's just, it felt really, and they're about the same age as us. It just felt very aligned.
And speaking of what's happened since that transaction went through, so I was reading this New York Times profile on your company. And so in that, it mentions that there's this arrangement where the co-founders, you and your two co-founders, can earn up to an additional $30 million based on hitting 2026 targets. So with that in play, how do you think more broadly about, okay, and this is not for listeners too, this is kind of in the realm of normal, right? When a company is acquired, when the founders stay on, there's usually some degree of levers in place to make sure that the company still performs, hits the targets, and the founders still have their skin in the game, right? How do you think about that? Because you clearly have targets to hit, yet now you have this big backer, the lads behind you, and you still want to keep that satire, that humor, what made Betches so successful in the first place. So how do you think about all of it?
That 30 million isn't just like 1 year. It was the end of 2023, 2024, 2025, and through 2026. So it's all spread out over like 3 years.
Yeah.
So I will say that now that we're like 2 years post-acquisition, our roles as the founders have really evolved. And this is like part of how I can answer the question, is that Aileen really focuses on the business, and she is day to day leading the company. She is executing the vision, and really like all that credit for, getting the revenue, obviously along with our team, like making sure that, money is invested properly, that we're focusing on the right things. That is like her mammoth of a job. And obviously she gets, a ton of support from our team. We're almost at 100 now. And we've also combined with the US LBG office, which was very small. And then Jordana and I, and this is kind of an arrangement that we had like always been seeking. And, one of the hardest things even from the beginning was like getting ourselves into our own lanes. Mm-hmm. Everyone like did everything. Like we called ourselves like the three-headed monster, like because we just like all felt we had to do everything. And some of that, I think, is motivated by different things. Like one is like this like need to control our own baby. And then also feeling like you didn't want to be the one who was like slacking by like not being part of a decision or something. But I think really Jordana and I, we kind of have always, wanted to work more in like the podcasting or like talent and like on mic, on air talent area. And the way I kind of think about it is like Jordana does like interpersonal relationships, like, friends, dating, she has baby steps where she talks about fertility, like all these like very personal in your life things. And I'm sort of like the extra personal, like the like macro trends. Like I talk about pop culture, news, business, like all these sort of like bigger picture things and like how do they affect Betches. And that's kind of, I think those are just natural areas that we've always gravitated to as people. And basically at this point, we have a big team of 100. Aileen is leading them. And the two of us get to really work as talent on two of our biggest verticals, essentially, and our biggest shows. And that has given us really the space to, we are now like employees / talent. And in terms of keeping the voice, we have a team now that, even, obviously Aileen is, signing off on like everything that's big and like pitching our major clients and like making the big decisions. But we have entrusted our team at this point. And that's when I say like, I'm like, oh, the Viacom dream is on its way. I mean, obviously it's not the same thing, but it's like when you realize like, I just have to let them do what they do best. And even I would say like in the past year, it took a while to hit me. Like, oh, my job is different now. Like, I don't have to worry about everything. It's not on me, and it's actually offensive if I try to put my head in that because it's saying that I don't trust them to do their jobs. And so that was like a huge switch. My expectations are clear and they're exactly what I've always wanted them to be. And like getting that was so strange because for once I didn't have to like strive for more in that way, which has never in my life have I ever felt that. But that has been, talking about like myself going forward, that has been like a very eye-opening thing.
And you mentioned the different verticals that exist today, the baby steps and everything that you're dealing with in the macro world. As your brand has evolved, it's been around for a while, your audience has clearly evolved too, right? And so how do you think about keeping up with the Gen Zs of the world, the 24-year-olds, and the millennial audience who is moving on to a very new stage of life than they were when they started listening and consuming your content?
A lot of that is in hiring people who people who are Gen Z, who we trust, they understand what Betches is about. And we have had a ton of success with that. We have an amazing, Send Help is our Gen Z account. And we just really have amazing people who love working for us. Like our second year, we wanted to get interns and we had like 1,000 people apply. We have people who are enthusiastic about coming to work for Betches. And that is, I think, it's work sucks. It's hard. Yeah. But I think that as companies to work for goes, like I would really want to work for Bet. Like I remember when I was in college, like, do you ever read the Gossip Girl recaps on New York Magazine? I remember emailing like the most shameful email, I could probably even find it, to the writers, Jessica Pressler and what was the other one's name? I don't remember. But I was like, I really want to be your intern like one summer. They never answered, but like that's the kind of thing that we would get. And it was just like, yeah. That's really kind of, so we have amazing people who love the company, who have really amazing memories with the company.
Yeah.
Like if I could had $1 for every time someone says they remember reading it in college or they remember reading it to decide where they go to college, like I would have probably a few $100s, truly.
And I do have to say, the send help, more Gen Z angle, even the name is so Gen Z coded, right? So it's like you clearly have people who deeply understand the demographic, the types of information, because what I find so interesting about Betches and really what you're doing as you're kind of carving out these different verticals and understanding, okay, this specific vertical is going after this target demo and this type of person who has these unique interests that are going to be different from someone who's, you know, mentioning the fertility journey, right? The need to deeply understand that audience, you guys just, you've really nailed it.
I think that's the actual like secret sauce, like the special skill. And I think that is rooted in the founding of the friendship, because think about how you relate to your friends. Like you kind of see yourself in their eyes all throughout our lives. That's like, friends are so important. And I mean, we could talk about the bigger issues with how people are becoming less connected, less rooted in friendship. I think that is really the special sauce. Like you have people who understand you, who keep you realer than you would, you know, otherwise be. I mean, some people are like, exactly. But, you know, it's, yes, we really care about getting it right. And like when I talked about value earlier, like there's so many companies that will offer you slop more than ever now.
Yeah.
And there's people who will offer you slop and just repurpose shit that they like are copying. Like, but when we talk about like what's like our North Star, it's like actually changing people's lives, like, and not in like the cheesy way, like making them laugh, like changing their day, changing their sense of being seen. That's the value with a media company, because our customers are in many ways, it's, you know, it's the audience, but our customers are also our clients. And if you want to do right for those customers, those clients, you need to actually be providing value to the audience. So it's kind of counterintuitive, is that the people you need to provide the value for to make your customers happy is not as, I mean, you have to make the customers happy like over email. And like, that's a job. That's a very hard job. Like, I don't even want to go into that. Like, but I'm sure, you know, you're like in media, but the real, like the job you do is how you affect the audience.
Okay. So more recently, you've been focusing a lot more of your time on the political sphere in Betches News.
Yes.
So you've said before that Betches News is not fundamentally trying to become a newsroom per se, but you view it as this gateway for people who want to learn more about the world without necessarily doom scrolling as they're doing it. How do you decide in the Betches News space what stays in your lane versus what's off-brand?
We're not a newsroom. We are never going to be a newsroom. This is an interpretive space. Most of the time, it's not an active decision. Most of the time, it's like a capacity-driven decision or an interest-driven decision. Like, what is interesting? What do you feel you need to know? Also, the things that Betches News covers is different from the things that I will cover. I will cover on my own personal account versus on the morning announcements. The morning announcements is like I have a pretty specific process for how I'm picking stories for that. But ultimately, it's really like, it depends where you're asking. The account, the podcast, if I'm talking about something. But what the general goal is to elucidate what is going on. That's the point. Like the point is not to, you know, push an agenda. It is so people understand what's going on so you don't sound like an idiot. Like that's, you know, that's really what it is. We just want people to understand and we want to help them understand and not feel stupid or not feel like it's too complicated. And ultimately, like this goes even to the kind of philosophy behind my book, Democracy in Retrograde, How to Make Changes Big and Small in our country and our lives. I'm like, oh my God, I'm forgetting it. It's a very long title. The reason for that is because we have to live with the future. And, you know, there's a sense of purpose behind Betches. There's a sense of purpose behind Betches News. And it's like this sort of, that's what animates me. Like, we're going to have to live with this shit. I want people to understand it. And in a way that doesn't make them like feel it's so doomed, like it's so doomed.
You mentioned that you have a very specific process when you're going for the announcements. What is that process?
So I follow the news all day. It's basically like, do people need to know this because it's being like reported everywhere and they'll sound like just really dumb if they don't know? Is this important because like it's not getting enough attention and it's something people really should know? And then I'll try to add as much context as possible. Things that are funny. Like the idea behind Betches News was originally that politicians are just real housewives with suits and fancy rules. And that is borne out because that was the idea in 2015. And it is borne out to be true. And so showing the hypocrisy in what's going on, yeah, I would say those are the things. And I usually actually start from the last story. I put all the stories in order of basically like most important, most talked about, try to do like international, national, state, local. And then the, business goes usually somewhere in national. And at the end, I'll do like the easy story. And when I write it, I start from the end because it's easier to go like, you got to build yourself up.
Yeah.
And just things that just try to like keep it real. Like sometimes, I script the whole thing, but sometimes I'll just say something if it feels right. And then, my editor can play with that.
I spend a lot of my time thinking about how media news is very much being disintermediated, right? You have the New York Times, and no shame on them. I love the New York Times. I read the New York Times. However, the world is changing on the social front, right? People are consuming their news on their social feeds now.
Yeah.
If you look at especially younger generations, the majority of young people are getting their news from social. Yes. And so I think what any news that's now being formulated and surfaced in a social first way, that is the future.
Yes, but this is the thing. Where am I getting my news? The New York Times. I'm not, that's another thing. I'm not just like picking random stuff. The actual sources that I'm reading are the legacy sources, and then certain independent media companies, if they break news, if they're actually getting a scoop and it's verified, or if it's just ignored. So it is disintermediated. So those voices are diluted, and if something comes from them, it's not like the human mind can index like, oh, that really matters because it's been fact checked by a legal team and blah, 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 versus whatever Theo Vaughn just said. It's like there's no, in the way people consume it, there's no difference. But where are people getting their information? That they're talking about? They're getting from AP. They're getting it from Axios. So it's like, yes, they are being disintermediated, I think is a great word for it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, where is all the stuff that people are yapping about coming from?
Exactly.
So if they were all gone one day, it's like the real danger is that every publication like them, because of how fragmented and diluted they are, they're not able to make as much money to do as much reporting, and so more flies under the radar. I have to be honest, a lot of what they do is like access level reporting, and this is something I struggle to understand. It's like, oh, so you just call like the person in the office and you like ask them and like they're gonna tell you? Why are they telling you? Like why should I have to know them? Like, so what I find the most interesting reporting is like open source in like reporting, basically, where it's like open source, like you can just look up in a public record like what the lawsuit said. You can just like look up somewhere like in a public company's records. Like you can find there's a lot of information to be found that is not, that you don't need to ask anyone for that information. In fact, I think the problem with asking the people is that they're telling you what they want to tell you. So those are my thoughts on media. Journalism.
Yes. And so we've mentioned the fact that you've gotten more into politics, and you did end up stepping in as co-host of the American Fever Dream podcast. You also mentioned your book, Democracy in Retrograde. So what would you say specifically motivated you to really take this pretty strong focus on policy and politics?
When I was younger, I was into politics. Like that. For my whole life, like it's really like my family like was always watching the news. Like I see the news as a story that started when I was like 8. It's almost like I need to know what's happening. I care about it. I've always sort of cared about it. But also I find that most people who are like that are like really only into that, and they don't get into like other stuff, like other culture stuff. And I really do care about all that. Like I still care about like all the like everything else. Like, you know, it's not like that's the only thing that interests me. And I think that it's really wonky for a lot of people. Like you kind of segment themselves off into these like wonks who like can't, literally people in DC, when they come to New York, they feel like a fish out of water because they like do not consume other culture. And so they don't, like, it's bizarre. You might notice it, but like I only notice it as a pattern. And there's like this just disconnect. And I think that's actually like a fundamental issue with election, everything. The fact that they are so weird and segmented. But yeah, I think it's like I've always just been really into it. Like some of my earliest memories are like watching like Monica Lewinsky's like Barbara Walters interview and, you know, Al Gore and just so many random things. And then when in 2015, basically it was our first other vertical that we launched through Betches, and we started as a newsletter. And the idea was just we're going to write about it with like the satirical Betches voice. And that's kind of the Real Housewives. And ever since, news and politics have just meshed with culture in a way that I actually feel like, though I don't sacrifice like one or the other.
Do you get criticism from people who have very different viewpoints than you, especially on social, because you're posting all of the time on news and your personal pages? How do you deal with that?
I mean, here I am. I don't know. I don't. Like, I think, so, okay, sometimes I can get really snarky in the comments if people are like being disingenuous or just whatever. And some of that is like, I want to actually deter people from thinking that they can like come and say ridiculous shit to me. I hate being this person, but like the Jew hatred has really ramped in a way that I'm like, I want to wade into this so badly, but also I don't. Like it's just so frustrating. It like, you won't get anywhere. And yeah, I just kind of deal with it. But the thing is, I'm very tethered offline. Like I spend all my time online, but like my actual life that I think like is offline, you know, that's the price you pay. But I'll be fair, I'll be honest, I never have experienced like a mass like attack, kind of like a real cancellation for something. But I do feel that if I were to be canceled, I would probably, like if I thought it was like something I really did wrong, I would probably just apologize. And then like, what is it? Am I sorry? But you know, probably.
From a cancellation culture too, I think in an interesting way, and you're so deep in this because I mean, you report on the news basically every day, but I find that from my POV, especially on social media, there are these very deep almost segments. And so kind of people fall into the world that they want to fall into. And it's only those absolute batshit crazy people who aren't agreeing with you, who are like, I'm going to go in hard on Sammy's stuff and like pick her apart or tell her that I disagree. And then obviously you can just block them.
Well, I think, and I've talked about this on my page so far, I've made videos about this specifically, they're actually pinned. When Charlie Kirk passed away, was killed, didn't pass away. And when Taylor Swift's album came out. And I think that these are two instances where you can really see the siloification of social media. And I mean, I'm going to sound very conspiracy theory-esque right now, but I'm not, because this is all research and I can show you the documentation and everything. We have been algorithmically sorted based on obviously the platforms are sorting us by interest, but by psychological, neurological, like psychographics, things that will really bother us, or things that will really make us feel like really good. Like there is an active effort to divide people based on these culture war things. And that's why I say like culture is politics now. Like what people are fighting over, like the trans green M&M, like, you know, that is culture. Like that's a culture war. No one gives a fuck about the M&M. Or like, you know, think about just the amount of time spent on like college sports and trans people. Like how many people is this really affecting? Yeah. But then you realize like, oh, we've been fed this by the algorithm, forced to engage with it. What it's doing is it's appealing to like your basest like psychological trigger. So like if you are someone who feels like, okay, think about this. Let's say you have two people. One person is like pro-trans, one person's anti-trans, but they're both like psychologically very triggered by self-righteousness, like in a good way. Like that makes them feel really good. One person is going to be filtered into the like super activist, trans rights for all, like algorithm. And you're going to see like, that's what you're going to see. Everything is like pro that, being like, and the incentive is to be very like outspoken and pro. Then you have someone who's getting filtered into like Riley Gaines's, people, and you have them there and they're getting told, oh, you're the only one who understands the truth about the two genders and everyone's just a dumb lib and like all this bullshit. They're feeling like I know the truth and all of the rest of society is like persecuting me. And then you have the people over here who are like, I'm standing up for the marginalized. And they're both psychologically like working on the same thing, but they believe different things and they are fighting each other now. There's a military grade operation, influence operation to do this to us that is like partially assisted by the algorithms and the platforms wanting to make the most money. Part of it's assisted by our own psychology and our own incentives and need to make money. And part of it is assisted by foreign actors who want to make us to really just influence elections at the end of the day. So, if you ever wonder why you like find yourself talking about some of this dumb bullshit, it's because it's lucrative.
Yeah, that could be a podcast on its own.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your book and some specific elements that I find to be fascinating. And 2025, I think, was really the year that the trad wife and the ideology behind trad wife really blew up. It existed before then, but I feel like this was really its year. And you talk about this, about how specific aesthetics, right? There's the sourdough, the chickens, the pastoral imagery, the bucolic hills, right?
Which are lovely.
Yeah, which are gorgeous, right?
And please stop co-opting. I like that.
These images are or can be dangerous in some elements when you think of the ideology behind them.
They can be weaponized.
Yes. Why is this style of content so effective with young women today?
Because it's pretty and it is frictionless and it's ethereal and real life is gritty and ugly, and go outside and look at the subway and then go on your phone. It's also on your phone, which is like, pretty images are pretty. That's literally, it's like that simple. Pretty images are pretty.
If you were to design a feminist counter aesthetic for 2025 or 2026, what would that look like?
Honestly, like I don't exactly know, because I don't know how you would go about that even. But like my instinct is telling me it's something very maximalist. It is not neutral, high saturated colors. Like what your shirt is in the realm.
Yeah.
Like tight patterns, textures, something that deflattens. I don't know why I'm thinking this. Have you ever seen like topography of map of the United States?
Yeah.
Like where it's like the east is like mostly flat and then like the west is all like, okay, like there the east is the trad stuff where it's like, it's like light and flat. Google topography map of the United States, everyone. And then the west is like all textured and colored and like interest, like, and there's different pieces of it, like you feel like more of like a tapestry or like a fabric that's been woven together. Not that I like that quilting vibe, that I wouldn't include quilting in it. That's a little bit pastoral, but like high gloss, color blocking, patterns, sophistication, like just something very not simple.
Yeah, more nuanced. So you mentioned that the left is really good at whispering in the DMs and not really speaking publicly about their beliefs as much, while the right is very much strategically building this voting block through culture wars, right? What do you think the playbook is that the progressives would need to counter that?
One thing I want to say about the right is you cannot underestimate the power of money. They have so much more money than, not that like the left can't. First of all, I think money should be out of politics entirely. I think that would solve a lot of problems. That's actually my like big soapbox. One person, one vote. Corporations are not people. Money is not speech. This is bullshit. Like, let's just get the money out. But the reason the right is so successful is partly because of money, partly because it's easier to, we're kind of a religious, the country's fairly religious. It's easier to make people feel safe. Like there's this fairly amount of psychology happening. And what you said about the left is good at whispering in DMs. The other piece of that is that like most people are just like normal and want things to kind of be fine. Like I talked about the different trans algorithms. Most people just are like, cool, you do you, and this is not my business, and this is your doctor's situation, and like I don't, but they've been like, you know, hyped up to believe that this is like really going to affect them. I think that there's like no constituency for normal. Like there's no constituency for just kind of like, we want everyone to be good. A good, I think, like encapsulation of the phrasing, I'm stealing this from Stephanie Rule, who's an MSNBC anchor. Sorry, MS Now. People want to be financially secure, socially free, and physically safe. And that's like pretty much what most people want in this world. And I think that that's what the government is responsible for. And there's no like mass of people who say that. But something we do talk about in the book is something we call the exhausted majority, where like it's just most people kind of have a mix of views and they just like want things to work. But the people who are making the most impact are on the extremes. I think that probably the best playbook is getting money out of politics, running people who are reflective of the districts they're in, and actually making a big tent that doesn't rip each other apart with like horseshoe politics. Like the horseshoe, are you familiar with this? Like,
yeah,
is really, I think, one of the most dangerous things. So it's this idea that, you know, on the left and on the right and the most extremes, they start to act similar and, you know, take on more authoritarian tendencies, whereas the middle of the horseshoe is like a more small L liberal, meaning like a free society where like free speech and all these other things. So I think that like actually making a constituency for the center of the horseshoe and saying like, we will figure it out. We want to create the conditions that actually represent everyone in this country, not billionaire. Like, it's so easy to just like criticize like millionaires and billionaires, but like we're talking about like 1,000 people that are actually the problem and their companies. We're not really talking about like someone who makes like, you know, $750,000 a year. Like that's not the problem here.
You've described that women have this decision to tap out or tap in. So what does tapping in look like for someone today?
Well, first, I think you can like tap in and tap out at different times in your life, like different seasons of your life kind of pan out differently. And what we talk about here is like being civically engaged. And that means being engaged in your community. And that can look like anything. Like it can look like volunteering at a soup kitchen. It can look like there's elements of it where it's like you just act like a pleasant person to the people you encounter in your life. Like when you go about your day and like, you know, helping your neighbor out, like just things that like you actually are in person with other people and you're building relationships for something that's not transactional. I mean, everything's kind of but you know what I mean? Like being on the board of your like, you know, like your building, if you don't like even if you don't want to be, you know what I mean? You know, running for school board, being the person who organizes like the kids' carpool, like, or an extracurricular, or like gets, you know, do a book club, like really just like deciding to engage with people because they're your neighbors. Like the kind of central concept of that inspired Democracy in Retrograde was that we all live in a self-help world. And we were just talking about this earlier. There's so much self-help where it's like, how do I be a better business person? How do I be a better mom? How do I be a friend, a daughter, all these things. But no one really thinks about their relationship as far as like the collective, like, oh, I'm a citizen of my town, I'm a citizen of this state, I'm a citizen of this country. And like when you say I don't care, it's like it's both a privilege but also kind of an assertion that like what you think doesn't matter. Like, and it does. Like it is a matter of self-respect and self-care to say I am a participant and I want to direct, I want my voice heard, I want to roll in how the future of where I live goes. And it's not just national. I actually think you can get way more done in like what happens on your street and your school is more likely to affect like your life so much more than maybe not this president, but the president generally. And I think that that's something like people should think about. Like it doesn't need to look big. It doesn't need to feel big. Like you can be a pillar or a pillar. You don't need to be the pillar of your community in ways that really make a difference with people. And that's really what it is. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to go so hard, I'm going to run for office. Like some people do have no fucking business running for office. Please don't. But Yeah.
Great. Prior to having this conversation with you, I spoke with a couple who is on the more conservative media side, the Hugobooms, who are behind Evie Magazine. And for those of you who don't know Evie Magazine, they call it many things, but one of the names for it is a conservative Cosmo. And so during that conversation, I asked Brittany, the co-founder, what she would ask a guest who was representing more of the liberal media side. And I have to warn you, this is kind of a bold question, but she wanted to ask this person. At the time, we didn't know it was you.
Okay.
We are very lucky to have you sitting here, but we didn't know who it was going to be.
You can send her my answer. Please.
Oh, no. Oh, she will hear it for sure.
Oh, good.
Would you gain 50 pounds in solidarity with the body positivity movement?
I already gained 75. It wasn't in solidarity, but in the view of some people, I'm sure. So years ago, 2016, my co-founder and I had a podcast called Diet Starts Tomorrow. And we were into it was like the anti-wellness wellness podcast, but I was working through an eating disorder live on mic, and I didn't have that insight into it, but that's what it was. It was like, oh, how are we going to be healthy? I was like, I actually just was giving myself continuing my lifelong eating disorder that I didn't understand to be such, because in culture, where only really thin people have an eating disorder. And I was like probably 20 pounds heavier than this. Pandemic comes. I'd been on a very intense wedding diet because my wedding was supposed to be April 2020. It gets canceled. I'm like, oh, whatever. I discover intuitive eating at this time. And I was feeling both wanting to try it as a method. And it wasn't the first time I tried it, but I really had dove in here. And part of what it made me so angry at diet culture was how profitable it was and how much mental energy it takes from your existence. There's this one line in Luckiest Girl Alive, I think, by Jessica Knoll, where she talks about how they have you on this constant self-improvement train of be skinny, be pretty, blah, 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 get Botox, blah, 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 whatever, so that you cannot think about bigger things and that you cannot think about the bigger problems in the world. And that is so fucking true. And so I basically I was like, I don't care. I don't think body positivity, well, you know what? Everyone should do their own thing. My thing is the thing that I discovered through this journey is body neutrality. I was over 200 pounds, at some point. Mm-hmm. I end up realizing that I had triggered PCOS. I've had PCOS my whole life, but I triggered an episode, which is that's kind of how it works. It's somewhat adaptive, whatever. But actually the advantage was I go to freeze my embryos and I didn't get any successful ones. But in that testing, what they discovered was that I basically probably was oh, you have PCOS. Now, it was so fucking obvious I had PCOS since I was a child, and had they put me on the proper medication as a teenager, I probably wouldn't have ever had an eating disorder. But because the only symptoms that people notice about PCOS are the ones that, or at least they used to, are the ones that make you look more masculine, like facial hair and baldness, no one ever was looking at the other symptoms that I obviously had. It was okay, so I have PCOS. I go on metformin. That regulates my cycle from the first time in my life.
Wow.
And it was great. I probably lose maybe 20 or 30 pounds. I'm able to freeze my eggs, my embryos successfully. Great. And over this time period of being heavier, I learned to just actually my body is no one's business. Being fat specifically, Brittany, made me realize that no, my value is not in my weight, and I refuse to live in that world. And I refuse to judge myself by that just because other people will. Here's the thing, okay, so you look bad in pictures, the most annoying thing is that it's hard to shop. And that is a capitalism problem, because the actual reason that it's hard to make plus size clothing is because when people are heavier, their weight is not distributed the same. So you can't make a pattern just go straight down. The annoying thing is finding clothing. It wasn't that I hated myself for how I looked. And that was when I realized oh, I actually don't. That's the eating disorder. I broke that binge relationship, that restriction. And what you learn is that to break a binge relationship, or you have to stop restricting. Your body has been my body was in starvation mode for 2 decades and believed that I was, no matter what I looked like, believed that famine was coming. And it was because every fucking Monday, diet starts tomorrow. That was the idea. Like that, I think what people don't realize is that like diet cycling especially is really bad for your health, and diet cycling gives you an eating disorder. And if you try to push your body into something that it doesn't want to be, you are actually hurting yourself. That's like the whole like health at any size. I think that applies by person. Who knows what someone's supposed to look like? And that's why body neutrality was like, I just stopped making this a factor in my life. Like, you can choose not to like obsess over it, but you have to like believe that you like yourself, even if you're fat, and that like that's not actually valuable to you. Comes GLP-1. For a while, I was like, I don't need to do that, whatever. Like, I was probably like a size 12, 14, and I was like, fine with it. My mom went to an endocrinologist, and she was like, you should just go see her, see what she says, blah, blah, blah. I had like a blood test with weird something after it being fine for a little bit. Then I go, she puts me on it. Now I'm the thinnest I've been my lifetime. But immediately, like, just works like a charm. Now, what I've realized, I've been on it for a year, this is like the miracle drug. And it's not about weight. If you are someone who has metabolic issues, which like I definitely have, that's like where the PCOS stems from. I've always had these same, like it's hereditary. Like you can look at my family, you see the body, like it's so obvious. And I also meet, I know people who have the same thing. They usually end up with an eating disorder because society tells you that you're too fat, and that makes you fatter and more disordered. The GLP-1 is the answer to these things. I really think that it can prevent so many eating disorders. I think that the weight is a reflection of inner metabolic health that affects other things too, because if you talk to people about like drinking, shopping compulsions, like people work harder, it is doing something to your body that is not that weight is the side effect of. There's so much like talk about it, like, oh, it's a cheating, blah, blah, blah. It's only cheating if you think weight is a moral issue. And why do you think weight is a moral issue? What the fuck do you care? And I don't know, I feel like I have just a very consistent feeling on body autonomy. It's like, leave people alone, let it be between them and their doctor. And like, just like, why are you so obsessed with other people's weight would be my question to Brittany and her husband. Why do you care? Like, actually, why do you care? Does it make you feel good? Like, and something I realized also from having this podcast for, we had it for 4 or 5 years. It's people, it's about them. It's a sense of morality. Obesity and like eating disorders are a capitalist. They're bad because of our incentives here. And I recommend the book Dead Weight by Emmeline Klein. She's actually a former Betches intern. She wrote a lot about this, where it's like dieting is an industry, food is an industry, even GLP-1s are an industry. But now you have food companies that want to re-engineer their food around the GLP-1. That would be my question. Like, why is everyone's weight your concern? Let people do what they need to do. GLP-1s are really fucking miracle, and we should be so grateful for the funding that helped people discover that.
This is not sponsored by GLP-1s, by the way. So we're going to the last 3 questions I ask every guest.
Yes.
Can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career, business, really anything?
I have no systems in place. Can you recommend some to me? I have no systems, but I do have just like some general rules that I live by, like that kind of pop up, and they're all like kind of just following your intuition and like recognizing patterns. And like, for example, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't fuck around with people who you don't feel like you trust. Like, try to do things that feel right to you. And these are all kind of luxuries, honestly, that I'm naming. But those are just some like, it's really more like I have kind of like personal rules that, and they're more intuitive. They're like softer. It's not like, oh, I wake up and I do this.
The next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend that's impacting business and culture. So for this one, Vogue announced in November that Teen Vogue was shutting down. And Teen Vogue did a little bit of a rebrand in the mid-2010s, where they started becoming more of like a socially engaged platform. And obviously their target demo is teens. So what did you feel when you heard the news?
Feel is like so different than like curiosity. Like, I'm curious because this is like the revenue model thing. News is not profitable. It causes issues. It's expensive if you're going to do real journalism, because you need to check everything legally, and lawyers are expensive and people are litigious if you are anyone who matters. I was wondering, I'm like, okay, was it like the money? Is it just like easier for them to like not give in? I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that there are so few outlets that are kind of like able to sustain this. And I would have hoped that Teen Vogue could be one that does, because of the model where it's like, maybe it doesn't have to make all of its own, it could be like maybe a loss leader for the brand. Like, I don't really know. But then again, like, it's just such a hard industry right now that I'm like, maybe they had to make a hard decision they genuinely didn't want to make. I just don't know. But it makes me sad, but I don't feel like a sense of like moral outrage. Like, how could they? Because I don't know enough about the decision. And maybe there's reporting out there on it and I just don't know. I'm not familiar with it. But I do think it's upsetting because I think it's an important viewpoint, and I wish they could just kind of like figure out a way to kind of, I don't know, all the wrong people have billions of dollars and own all the media, because like I'd buy it if I had the money to buy it. Like,
it's all Nepo babies buying all of the big media platforms now. Yeah.
Right, because you just can't accumulate enough fast enough. That's like, again, this like privilege thing. It's like you literally just can't possibly do it.
Yeah.
Unless
So let's end with a listener question. So this question comes from Julie. What is one thing that you wish every woman understood about how culture and politics are intertwined?
They're the same thing. There's a famous line, politics is downstream of culture, meaning that like culture filters down into politics. People who are obsessed with politics do not understand how culture influences it, why it influences it, because they're not usually attuned enough to the cultural beats. They're too caught up. They're too in the weeds of the political beats. I wish that there was like kind of a bridge that could show the people doing it, like how to get a temperature on things without like looking at polling by other DC people, which is like not polling the right things, in my opinion. They should be polling more like emotional sentiment rather than issue sentiment, because issues are, we're not voting for these things.
Yes. Well, Sami, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
If my listeners take away anything from this conversation outside of how intertwined both politics, culture, everything that we're doing on a daily basis is so interconnected, that's one. And number two, I think it's so rare to have a media company like yours that's been around for as long as you have and still maintained this really fun, distinctive voice. Those are my two things that I really want you to take away from this episode. So.
Thank you. Well, that is our North Star, to keep it authentic to what it is. And the other thing, just on your point one, business is the part that is actually like, I love your beat. Business is, if I could be like picking stuff to cover, like following the money is everything. And that, I think the other thing that people are missing that I would say is like, people are now missing how business is politics is becoming business. Culture is government, is business. So
it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Follow the money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast, because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.